Hi, and thank you very much for tuning in. This is the Flesh Bread series from Bishop Bernard Warui. Today, I want to speak about purpose. The question of purpose is one question that every individual must answer. Answer for themselves and be able to pursue. It is Pastor Rick Warren who said that there are two important days in the life of every individual. One is the day they were born, but the second most important day is the day that they discover why. When you answer the question why with regard to your life, what is your purpose? Why are you here? That is when you start living. And many people have struggled with this question of purpose. And one thing that I believe is that God never created us to come and look for something to do, but He created us with the purpose. You know, when He talks to Jeremiah in Jeremiah chapter 1, He tells him that before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. And it is not that I only knew you, but I consecrated you. I set you aside. I prepared you. I endowed you. I equipped you. I consecrated you to be a prophet to the nations. That was before he was even conceived, leave alone before he was born. It was before he was conceived. And I believe that word is very true for each and every individual this day. That before we were created, before we were conceived, God consecrated us, God equipped us, God set us aside, God prepared us for a specific purpose that we were to come and fulfill, we were to come and accomplish. And therefore, when we now come onto the earth, our assignment is to identify that purpose for which God created us and to pursue it with zeal, to pursue it with an aim of bringing the difference and the change that God desires of us. For purpose is not the activities that we engage in, but rather the difference that we make in the lives of the people that God has allowed us to live. When I look at the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, I see that purpose is about people. It's about changing lives. God's interest is people. And everything else He does is for people. And therefore, you have not been called for self-endowment, for gratification. You've been called to bring a difference in the lives of people. And therefore, the question of purpose is a question every one of us must be able to answer at one point in life. And the earlier you answer it, the better, so that you start pursuing it. Allow me to share with you about 6 questions that are important as you identify and pursue your purpose. And I must say that purpose is multifaceted. It's not a singular thing. There is an overarching theme, but it's multifaceted. God has created you and given you the opportunity to be in very many spaces. And in all these spaces, God is using you to bring a difference. God is using you to bring a desired change. So it's multifaceted, but there must be that overarching theme. What is it that I'm achieving? Yes, I'm an accountant, like myself. I'm an accountant. I'm a pastor. I'm a father. I am a husband. I am an author. I write books. I am a mentor. I belong to several school boards. I do so many things. What I must ask myself is, in all these things that I'm doing, what is that thing that I am achieving? What is that difference that I am making? What is that difference that I'm making? And when you have that overarching theme for your purpose, then you're able to assess the things that you do, the activities that you engage in, the differences that you make. How do they contribute to the main agenda of your life? Because you have an assignment to fulfill. Let me share with you 6 questions that are important for you to consider as you consider what your purpose is. Question number 1, what has God said to you? What has God said to you? When I look at Moses, God spoke to him. When I look at Elijah, God spoke to him. When I look at Jeremiah, God spoke to him. When I look at Ezekiel, God spoke to him. Isaiah, God spoke to him. Paul, God spoke to him. Peter, God spoke to him. Even when Jesus was being baptized, God came and spoke. What has God said about your life? God spoke, he is still speaking. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Have you heard God regarding your purpose? And God has no difficulties communicating to us. And therefore, I urge you to hear God for yourself. Have an encounter with God. The other day we had revival meetings with Pastor Harrison. And he said that it is when you have an encounter with God, a man has an encounter with God, and through that encounter, God reveals their purpose of existence, that they start living. You start living when you've heard God and known what he is saying about your life. And there are many ways that God speaks, and maybe we can handle that topic in another day. But question number one is, what has God said to you? What has God said to you? Number two, what is the burden of your heart? What burdens your heart? What burdens your heart? When Moses was walking aloud and he came across an Egyptian harassing a Jew, what happened? He got a burden. He got agitated by what was happening, and he actually killed that Egyptian. It's a burden. When Jesus Christ was looking at the crowds and the masses, and they were harassed, they were like sheep without a shepherd, what happened to his heart? It was filled with compassion. It was filled with compassion. That was burden. When he saw people who were hungry, remember the crowd, they were hungry, and he was compassionate towards them. Compassion, that's a burden. That's a burden of your heart. That's a burden of your heart. When Nehemiah heard how the people who had been left in Jerusalem were living in shame and reproach, what happened to him? He got a burden in his heart. As you walk on the streets, as you look at people, as you do the things that you do, what burdens you? What is that one thing that births compassion deep within your heart? And the burden I'm talking about, what happens is that it's not a weird thing. It's not just feeling like, oh, what is happening to this one? No. It's you feel compassion, but number two, you are willing and ready to make a difference. You find this is not right. A difference needs to be made, and I'm willing to be the one making the sacrifice to bring that difference. You feel you are the one to do it. And don't ignore that inner voice, that inner prompting that comes deep within your heart as a burden. When you find people who are drunk on the roads, when you find children who are not going to school, when you find young people getting lost in sexual immorality, drug, and all these things, does it burden your heart? Does it make you feel that you need to make a difference? So question number two is, what burdens your heart? Question number three is, what investment has God made in you? What investment has God made in you? And that investment could be actually the person that you are. What's your personality? What are your gifts? What are your talents? What are your, all these things that God has invested in us. What has God invested in you? What has God allowed you to enjoy as a blessing from Him? Those gifts, those talents are not given for self. They are given for you to fulfill your purpose, and they could be pointers. And all these questions work together. There is none that works exclusively alone. They work together to point you towards your purpose. So what has God invested in you? What is it there in you that speaks to your purpose? To your purpose. Question number 4 is, where has God positioned you? You were not born in whatever place you were born in by mere chance. God was not doing picky ponky and found that there was a vacant family somewhere and positioned you there. There was a vacant family in this county and positioned you there. No, God has positioned you in the places that you are for a purpose. And I call that divine positioning. So you must ask yourself, where has God positioned me? I believe the steps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord. And therefore, if you're a righteous man, you're one who believed Christ and walk in His ways, you don't just find yourself in places. You don't just find yourself in places. God takes you there. Joseph found himself in Egypt. That was the path through which God was to use him to fulfill His purpose. And He said His purpose was for the saving of many lives. Where has God positioned you? Moses, along the way, was positioned in different places, because sometimes positioning can be dynamic. And in all these places where he was positioned, it was for his preparation. It was for his purpose. Where has God positioned you? And with that positioning, what has He allowed you to enjoy and access? Because positioning brings you to relationships. Position brings you to resources. Possession brings you to knowledge. Nehemiah was in the king's palace. That's possessioning. Why? He needed resources to go and rebuild the wall. And the way to access those resources was to have a relationship with the king. Where has God positioned you, and what is that positioning doing? Where is it setting you up? Many of us are wasting positionings that God has given us that we may fulfill the purpose for which He has called us. Finally, question number 6 is the question of resources. What resources has God provided for you? What resources has God provided for you? Many of us have access to different levels of resources and even different types of resources. The resources that God has allowed you to access are pointers to the fulfillment of your purpose. Nehemiah actually accessed even the forest of the king. Imagine, even the forest of the king. Joseph, through his dream and God's positioning, accessed the storehouses of the king. And by virtue of that, the fulfillment of his purpose was up there. But allow me to add and say, you must also ask yourself, what or which people has God given you favor with? Because if purpose is about people, if purpose is about impacting the lives of people, then what happens is that you don't go looking for those people. It is God who brings those people to you. So if you find yourself having favor and being able to enjoy the favor of certain people, God is speaking to you. God is saying that I have favored you in this area. There are people who are always coming to you. The young people, the young children. I always tell people, not everyone who sits and small children come to them and start engaging them and having fun with them. Not everyone. And so there are certain things you see, and God is giving you favor with certain people, and God is saying, these are the people that I'm sending you to. So those are very, very important questions for you to ask yourself as you go towards the identification of your purpose. Like I've said, they work together, they cooperate, they all point to the same thing. You don't have to rely on one and not the other. All of them must be pointing to one thing, because God is not in the business of introducing confusion in the lives of His children. So question number 1, what has God said? God is still speaking. Listen for yourself and hear what He is saying. Question number 2, what endowments? What has God given you in terms of gifts, talents? Even your personality is a gift from God. Question number 3, where has God positioned you? Where has God positioned you? Because that positioning is giving you a privileged platform to be able to identify and fulfill your purpose. Question number 4, what resources has the Lord allowed you to access? What resources has the Lord allowed you to access? Because those resources are also pointers, are also telling you what God requires you to do. Question number 5, which people has God given you favor with? Because when you have favor with those people, it simply means that God is speaking through that favor. Question number 6, and I had mentioned it as number 2, is what burdens your heart? What is that one thing that burdens your heart? Every time you see this thing happening, every time you see it not working, and it can burden your heart in 2 ways or 3 ways. 1, it makes you see the need for a difference to be made. Or when you do something and you are able to accomplish it so well, however costly it is, it may not even give you any financial or material gain, but you feel a lot of fulfillment. That is a pointer towards your purpose. Go out there, identify your purpose, and fulfill it. Remember, you are here for a specific purpose. If you don't fulfill and pursue that purpose, then it will be just as if you never lived. God bless you. This is the Flesh Bread series with Bishop Bernard Warui. We'll see you later.